Today we're soloing out a special Squaresoft JRPG that never made its way to the West.
This is Pixelated Audio, episode 35, featuring Treasure Hunter G. Welcome back to another episode of the bi-weekly video game music and retro gaming podcast Pixelated Audio. We're your hosts. I'm James, and sitting across from me is Brian.
How's it going, guys? Thank you for joining in on another show. Today we are actually reaching into our backlog of game music to cover, and this has been on the plate for quite a while.
Yeah, we planned to do this a long time ago, and I'm really happy that we're finally able to talk about this and share the music with everyone, especially since a lot of you have probably never heard of this title.
So today we're going to be listening to the beautiful sounds of Treasure Hunter G for the Super Famicom, and the track that brought us in was called Gemini Wing, composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful sounds is the exact way to put this. This track is so triumphant, beautiful instruments, and like the samples are so good.
Yeah, we like to start the show off with usually like title music or intro music, because what sets up the game also kind of sets up our show. It gets you into that, I don't know, adventurous spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think building up to this grand orchestrated track just is so fun and so cool to listen to, and it really gets you in the mood.
Yeah, and after playing this game for a little bit, this is the perfect way to set the mood. I mean, this track is so robust, but still fun, and
Right.
I think that's a great way that to kind of describe this game, is that it's a JRPG that doesn't take itself too overly serious. I mean, there's tons of funny bits and just great adventure in this game, and I think this track had all that just in that short little bit.
So, you know, we're well overdue for an RPG as well.
Oh yeah, I think it's been episode 5 was the last RPG we did, so it's like we're 30 episodes overdue.
It's funny too, because we were talking like, hey, we're going to do an RPG. We were thinking to ourselves, we're going to do an RPG every 5 or so episodes, really get some more in there under our belt, and it just, time constraints and stuff, it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
But the music, we always talk about like certain, RPG music, and we're like, oh, this is really great, we got to do an episode. So I'm really glad that we're finally getting around to doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard because I remember with the Wild Arms episode, we put in close to 20 hours each in the game, and that's hard to do.
As adults, yeah.
I know I didn't get anywhere near that far in this game, but it's so much to dive into. I mean, you play the game for hours and you're still not into that story yet. So that's one thing that's great, but it's also hard to do on a bi-weekly basis. So.
Right. Okay, so let's explain the game a little bit, because many people haven't heard of it since it never made its way out of Japan and was never officially localized.
Treasure Hunter G is a tactical JRPG that was released for the Super Famicom in May of 1996, developed by Sting and published by Squaresoft, which is now Square Enix.
Right, and my first exposure to this was, I have a little story. It's not like an amazing story or anything, but I was living in Japan at the time, and there's this franchise there that sells retro games. It's called Super Potato.
Awesome.
And yeah, they're really popular. There wasn't many around, actually, when I was living there, like early 2000s and stuff, but now you can find them anywhere. There's Nagoya, Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto. They're all over the place. Anyways, this retro game store, I would walk over there and, always kind of find something new. I was picking up a ton of PC Engine stuff at the time. They had this little kiosk where they would show like, whatever Super Famicom game or Famicom game they want to showcase or they want to sell or whatever. I walked up and this game was on the display. I was really intrigued because it has like a little bit, I don't know, something different about the graphics that I noticed. It didn't seem quite like a Super Nintendo game, but it did. And I don't know. I just watched a little kid play it for a while, and I was just really interested. And the music was just really, I don't know, it was really profound. It stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned the graphics, that was how I felt when I first saw this game, was that there was something about it that was so unique for the Super Famicom and, Super Nintendo here. Like it had that look, but it didn't. So that was really drew me in. We'll get into the graphics a little bit later, but
right.
I mean, that was my first thought, and the music too, just right away, just sucked me right in.
It just stayed with me for so long that I showed you this game and you were like, oh my God, the music is so good. We got to do it. And so we're finally cracking the whip on ourselves and covering it. But we also want to mention that if you don't speak Japanese, there is a way to play this because it was translated. I think the final version was released in 2002 by somebody named Metalhawk, and he did the fan translation. So if you can find that ROM, we don't want to endorse like piracy, but like, definitely it gives you the ability to be able to play this game. And this is how you actually play through it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't speak Japanese, so I would have had no real way to play this and have a good understanding other than maybe watching a playthrough and having somebody explain what's going on and stuff like that. So this was really great, and the translation seemed really good. I didn't notice anything that sounded or read really funny because it's all text-based. And I mean, I didn't notice anything that jumped out that was like, whoa, that maybe is translated funny. So it seemed fun. I mean, I got 5 hours or so into the game, and it was really, really fun.
And you were able to follow the story and enjoy it all the way through. That's cool because I didn't play the translated version, so there might be some discrepancies in our notes here. But
yeah, so I mean, all the menus were translated, everything, all the cutscenes, everything was all translated. It was really cool.
Very cool. So yeah, that gives you guys an option to be able to play it and at least kind of experience it since we never got it over here. Anyways, we have a lot of music to play, so let's go ahead and jump right into our first track. The song is called Well, Let's Get Out There and Fight, and it's composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka.
You just heard Well, Let's Get Out There and Fight, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka for Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom.
It's a pretty cool little track, right?
Yeah.
It's got those classic Super NES trumpet fanfare sounds. And there's one thing that I noticed about this track, re-listening to it with you, is the bass drum, or the concert bass drum. It sounds like it's a little bit short. It's like cut off.
I can see that.
It doesn't have like that ringing kind of.
Doesn't resonate the same.
Exactly. But the track itself is really fun. I like this. It's a really cool way to start out the show too.
Yeah, it's so funny like that how like we listen to so much chiptunes music. Like for me, this feels like legit classical music. And I'm sure someone else that's not into chiptunes is like, that sounds funny. Like I can see that it's like classical music, but to me this is like I just can see like the orchestra and like all the band members like playing like
and the
have their little MIDI
there
keyboards or whatever, but it's like a whole bunch of them and I can just see it in my mind and it just sounds so legit. Like and so, but I'm sure for other people it's just like, no, there's something odd about this track.
I know what you mean, and there's a lot more music that we're gonna play today that has that feeling. So it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because even for me too, I do when I hear these chiptunes, these are so well done, and they use amazing samples that I picture an orchestra actually playing this stuff, and I picture each individual person with their individual instruments playing certain parts, and it's something that I think this game does a really good job about, at least convincing you that there is something live going on here. I think that's pretty awesome. Anyways, so the game was published by Squaresoft but not developed. So unlike a lot of their in-house titles like Final Fantasy, Seiken Densetsu, and Chrono Trigger, the story may come off a little less rich or like underdeveloped, but I think Sting, the developer,
not the musician,
thank you, James, does a great job at getting those feelings across without being overly wordy.
Yeah, I mean, the story is good, but it is a little bit cut and dry. But let's talk about Sting for a second because they're one of the few small Japanese developers that's still developing titles today. I mean, they may not be the most recognizable company around, but they've created a lot of gems over the years that have a really sizable following.
Right.
So Sting was founded in 1989, and their first title was a top-down action game called Psycho Chaser, released in 1990 for the TurboGrafx-16. But Treasure Hunter G was kind of their first really big title.
Yeah, but they're also known for the Dokapon series, Last Battalion on the Sharp X68000, Baroque, a first-person dungeon crawler for the PlayStation and Saturn, the Evolution series for Dreamcast, which was the first real RPG for the system, and both Riviera, the Promised Lands, and Idra Union for the Game Boy Advance.
But they continued doing their own thing until around 2009 when they struck a deal with Atlus to have Atlus publish some of their Japanese-only titles.
And Atlus was really interested because they liked Sting's work to have them do their in-house stuff as well.
And then in 2012, Sting collaborated with a company called Idea Factory, where they utilized each of their talents to do a collaboration called Generation of Chaos, Pandora's Reflection, which actually only took them 3 months to make.
That's crazy. 3 months of development time. Wow.
And for their first collaboration, which is just nuts. But then they went on to do games like Knights in the Nightmare, Hyper Devotion Noir, Goddess Blackheart, which came out in 2015 for the Vita. And they're still working on titles to be released this year with Atlus. So like we said, we have a ton of music to play, and we have this really beautiful track we want to throw in real quick. The track is called Love's Escape, and we'll be right back.
That was Love's Escape, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka for Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom.
Oh, man.
What a great... Oh, man. Yeah. It starts off really slow, and the synth is kind of mellow and relaxed. About halfway through, the bass just... I don't know. It's so powerful, so... I don't know, energetic. The bass in this, I mean, Mitsuhito Tanaka, like, we're going to be hearing a lot of his tracks today, and you're going to hear just time and time again, like, this wild bass lines, and I love that. I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very beautiful track, and I mean, it was just filled with, like such a longing heart, and then there's the part where it comes back in, and it's so powerful. It's just like, It's like they decide to not be sad anymore, and it's just, like, so intense. Like, it was just... When I was listening to this, it just was invoking all these emotions within myself that it was just really great. I mean, I really love that about I mean, a lot of people that don't listen to game music, they hear and then think, oh, it's just gonna be like stupid, like chirpy. But this, like, there's some very emotional stuff in these games. And I mean, for JRPGs and just RPGs in general that tell such a deep story, they have to have such a wide range of music. And it's just, this track was really good.
Yeah, I really liked that organ solo in there too. I think that was so wild. And it kind of goes progressively higher and higher and higher. And then it goes, boing, and then it goes back down to that mellow kind of feel toward the end of the track. And I think that was really, really fun. Anyways, back over to Treasure Hunter G, because this wasn't only a significant game for Sting, but also for Squaresoft as well, because it's the last game they put out in the 16-bit era, and also their move from Nintendo as their primary platform.
Right, and it wasn't until 6 years later, in 2002, when they'd actually come back to Nintendo with the release of Chocobo Land on the Game Boy Advance.
I'd never played that game, so I couldn't tell you if it's any good.
Yeah, me either.
Maybe it wasn't a phenomenal comeback.
Anyway, so Treasure Hunter G is a really big turning point in gaming history for the company, but we decided to focus on this game because it just has a lot of charm and really flexes Super Nintendo's musical capabilities with this amazing team of composers.
And with all the music in this game, it made it really, really tough to narrow down. A lot of orchestral tracks, which is kind of expected from an RPG, but we picked a great lineup today that not only showcases these really grand scores, but also a lot of other styles that demonstrate the variety of genres that are presented in the game.
Yeah, so let's jump into another song from the soundtrack. The title is called The Absence of My Father from My Childhood. So we'll play that and we'll be right back.
You just heard The Absence of My Father from My Childhood, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka for Treasure Hunter G on Super Famicom.
Oh, man, yeah, beautiful track. I mean, I don't have the capability or the background to be able to explain this song within notes or terminology and stuff like that, but just like the feeling of this song, I feel really fits with the title. I felt like this song had a story element to it almost, like it starts out very kind of like simple and kind of sad, and I felt like this song represented like the passage of time for the children. It was like they kind of started out, and as they grew without their father, they became their own people. There's still a little bit of like sadness to it, even as they grew into more adults. But like that's what I kind of got from this song, is that there was a sadness, an overarching sadness, but the notes grew into their own thing as more instruments got added and stuff like that.
And I think that's what the composer wanted you to feel, because this is kind of telling the story of these children. We'll get into the story in just a minute, but it is kind of portraying this feeling, these emotions that, how do you show this in music? How do you kind of convey the meaning across? You know, you're not going to hear any voices, so you can't hear what the people are talking about. You can only see text. So
yeah, so there's no intonation in how they're saying things or where they're irritated and stuff like that.
Exactly. So the music is the one that has to be the, you know, purveyor of explanation. And I think that he did a great job with the soundtrack, kind of giving these messages and you know, hinting at these different kind of subtleties and ideas and thoughts. And I think that was really powerful. This track, though, for me, I think the star is not the melody, not the main melody. It's the samples for that classical guitar that's plucking in the background, and the bass. I think that by itself was amazing. It was so pretty. It was so well done. And I can't believe those samples are coming out of the Super Nintendo.
I know.
They sound so clean and so...
It feels more like a PlayStation game or something.
Yeah, it sounds like more like CD quality audio. And hearing, you know, that really fine kind of classical plucking is just superb. I think it was a really great track. And I almost didn't need that melody at all. I thought that everything behind it stood out on its own. That was cool.
Well, I mean, so far we've only played Mitsuhito Tanaka's songs. And I mean, and you're just seeing like the mastery that this guy has.
Yeah, let's talk about him for a second. So he started working at Tecmo in the 80s, but moved over to Sting in the 90s. He did Tecmo World Wrestling on the NES, TKO Super Championship Boxing on the Super NES, Jetsons The Invasion of the Planet Pirates for the Super NES. So that's a hard one to say. Yeah. And Super High School Baseball, One Ball Intimacy for Super Famicom.
Wow, that's an awkward one to say.
Yeah, and Solid Runner for the Super Famicom. You know, when we brought in the track, you actually kind of were laughing a little bit about the track title. Why is that?
Oh, I mean, it's just... It's fun because playing this game, there is like a silliness to this game.
Right.
And... to hear the track titles, what they've been translated to, it's just...
ridiculous.
It's so like, oh my God, like... The absence of the father from my childhood, like that's very deep, and it sets up this thought of that there's some emotional scarring, and to see like some of the funniness that's in this game, but there is like a very emotional quality to this game, which I think really kind of sucked me in, especially towards the beginning, because you bond with these characters, and
right.
I think for something where you're going to play for 60, 80 hours, I mean, if you don't bond with those characters, they don't feel real to you, then it's a kind of a waste of time. And
exactly, for an RPG especially.
Yeah, so even with these titles, you could see that these were thought of as very serious. Like, you can't have a game that's just super serious all the time. It's too much. But, I mean, it's very
like a playful seriousness. Yeah, there is some disturbing factor underlying in the meaning, but like kind of overcoming that and seeing the characters kind of act in a silly way in certain situations makes them feel more human, makes them feel more real. Like, you know, like, hey, all this bad stuff is going down, but let's be positive about it. And let's, you know, enjoy things that we have right now. And I think that makes this track really cool, and the rest of the soundtrack as well. But I think really with all the emotion and stuff that's going on with the music and kind of these underlying, you know, meanings that it's hinting at, the story itself is actually kind of weak. I guess it's pretty generic at its core.
Yeah, so the basic storyline is that a dark king was sealed away over 1,000 years ago until an unsuspecting treasure hunter disregards a myth about taking this hidden crown that would bring him back to life and dive the world into chaos and horror. So he does this. It's not like the most unique story, like we said, but what the game really has going for it is the journey and all the subplots and challenges that you take part in along the way.
Right, and I think that if we explain the beginning of the game, it'll be a little bit more interesting, because that was so basic. But I mean, that's really what it, you know, cut and dry, that is what the game, like the main plot is.
Yeah.
But I think we can kind of get into a little bit more detail in the characters a bit if we kind of go through the first part.
Yeah, I think that would be a good way to lay it out. So the game starts up, and there's this scrolling text with an introduction, and it reads as follows: all of the world is an adventure.
You're going to do it like that?
Yeah.
All right.
Now you killed my vibe, so I got to start again.
All right, go ahead.
All of the world is an adventure. These were the words of the great treasure hunter Gamorus VI. Now, however, hundreds of years have passed since the Great Wars. In this world of nothing but minor skirmishes between neighboring countries, chances of an exciting adventure seem slim to none. This is the story of two brothers, a mysterious girl, and a strange monkey adventuring in a world that, unbeknownst to them, was about to change drastically.
No, it was good. Anyways, after the intro, you're given the option to name two of the main characters, both brothers Red and Blue G. Yes, their last name is G, like the letter G. Anyways, the scene fades into the small village house of Ruri, where the two boys are sleeping in bed, and their grandfather, Silver, starts smacking them to get them out.
Yeah, Blue gets up right away and is pretty upset. He wakes up crying every day, which I think is kind of the younger brother thing.
I think that's the role. He's kind of unsure of himself, has a little bit of...
Kind of looks to his older brother a lot.
Right.
Which his older brother, Red, is still asleep. And then the game cuts over to his dream that he's having about an argument with his father, Brown G.
Yeah, and Brown is kind of a deadbeat dad. He's never really around. He kind of leaves the kids on their own. And when he does make an appearance, he tells them all these stories about like the World Tree and these crazy flying vessels called Ferric Falcons, but never really says where he's going or what he's doing. So Red calls him out on it, but he just says, hey, this is nothing you have to worry about. Just forget about it for now. Continue to do your own thing. And Red gets pissed, so he punches him and bolts over to his grandfather's house with Blue.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to suck. The only time you see your father is he's talking about all these amazing adventures that he's going on, and it's like, are these ventures more important than me and my brother?
Yeah, are these even real? Or are you just making up a bunch of lies and going out to the bar and, spending the time with ladies? And I think that's kind of what he kind of alludes to. Yeah. Red kind of believes that his dad is lying about all this stuff. He doesn't really trust anything his father has to say.
But that's where the dream cuts out, and we're back to him waking up. Anyways, then they start chatting with their grandfather about a clock that he swallowed.
Okay, hold on a second. We got to explain that because, it's really weird.
Yeah, so and the idea of it is that the grandfather's wife passed away.
Right.
And so he goes and gets hammered at this bar, and he says he's going to swallow this clock so it'll always tick inside him and he'll never forget her.
When I first saw that in the text, I was like, okay, I get it. It's a little cheesy.
It's interesting. You don't see too many people with clocks, but he wakes up and he's like, oh, it's dinner time. And they're like, oh, that clock is still ticking? And he's like, yeah. And they listen to his stomach. And, and you hear like tick, tick, tick. And he's like, it's like lunchtime or breakfast or whatever. So he's like, he lives by the clock in his stomach.
It's pretty funny too, but we'll get into it a little bit more. Anyways, after chatting a bit, a villager named Harbattle comes in. He says that he's found one of these Ferric Falcons crouched in the ancient cave. So naturally they're like, hey, let's go check this out. This is something our dad has talked about and we could actually see one. Let's go actually investigate. Yeah,
so they make their way to the cave, and that's where they teach you how to do your fighting and stuff like that. And then they finally find the spot where the Ferric Falcon is off in the distance. And at this point, we're introduced to Hell, which is one of the antagonists, and her guards plant a bomb and then they take off. So while the kids and their grandfather are still watching, they see someone that looks like Brown, their father, climbing into the Ferric Falcon.
Yeah.
But then, this bomb is about to go off, so they decide, well, we got to get out of here. We don't have time to really find out if it's him. Let's take off.
There's some more we'll get into, but let's get into some more music. So the first track we're going to play is The World's Cavern 1, and this actually plays during the Aged Cave. So where we're just explaining, this is actually the track that plays, and it's a really fun track. And then we're going to play Come Here, I Defend You.
That was The World's Cavern 1 and Come Here I Defend You for Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom, both composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka.
The first one, The World's Cavern, we both were like, oh, this has got to go in there.
Yeah.
It's such a cool track. So smooth. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to the soundtrack by itself before I started playing, and I was like, wow, this track is cool. And then when it came on in the game, I was like, whoa, this track is really awesome. Like, I really liked it.
Yeah, I really liked it. Did you notice in that first bit there, I think like kind of on the intro coming in, the rock crush sound effect?
No, I didn't.
It's like this, like if you listen to it again, you'll notice, and they do it again at the loop because you can, it's the intro all over. But I thought that was kind of clever. It added a lot to inside of a cave feeling.
Yeah.
And to kind of go along with that too, that what I liked is there's a lot of little instruments, like kind of motifs that like did little twinkles here and there. And that reminded me of like little critters in a cave. There's different panning. So you're hearing it sometimes in the left and sometimes in the right. And when you're walking through this dark cave, you hear like, little sounds everywhere. And that kind of gave me the sense of being in, this deep, dark cavern.
Yeah, I did notice those, and I thought that was very cool. I wrote that down. It's like something that I wanted to bring up, but you beat me to it. But I really do like that this has a different sound, a little bit of a different feel than some of the stuff we played before. Has a little bit of like 90s mysterious, like a kind of exciting, like adventure. So it's a different type of adventurous sound, but great track. I mean, like I said, this first time I heard it by itself,
it's fun. It's really fun.
And then when I heard it in the game, I was like, oh man, this is where this takes place. It's very cool.
Yeah, again, just really cool samples. The Come Here I Defend You track, I thought this was a blast. It's such a cool thing. I think my favorite part of this track was that church organ breakdown in the beginning, or in like kind of midway through actually. It starts off, it's very adventurous, and then all of a sudden that church organ comes in. It's really like dark, kind of cathedral sound. I thought that was awesome.
It had this feeling of like the floor dropped out and then the organ took over, which I thought was very cool. Another thing that I really liked about that song is that clap. There was like, and then it like kicks up a notch, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like it just kind of drew your attention to they're about to just like ramp up a little bit. So,
but I think both of these, they kind of contrast. They don't really fit together that well, but we matched them up because this does, like we were saying earlier, shows the different levels of, or the different genres that are in this game. There's so many different musical tastes and musical influences that we're hearing. It makes the soundtrack very interesting to listen to because it's not just orchestral. It's not just, I mean, we have plenty of that, but there's all these little tiny other subgenres baked in, and I think that makes it really fun.
Yeah, it's always great to see a soundtrack that has a ton of different styles and kind of sounds and emotions into it, but that still go together. Like, it doesn't feel like this is a track that could have been from a different game or anything like that. It's like they all still have a feeling, the kind of cohesiveness, but they're all a little bit different, so you're not hearing the same thing over and over.
Right. Anyways, let's get back over to the story. So to continue where we left off, they leave the cave just as the bomb blows up, and then they head back to the town of Ruri, where their grandfather lives. And he tells them about their father's secret adventure room hidden inside their house, the house that they grew up in, and that they should probably go check that out.
Yeah, and as they're leaving, they run into two new characters that you get to play as called Rain and Ponga, who Silver actually rescued from monsters earlier, which we find out in a cutscene. So Rain is a mysterious girl that we don't really know much about at this point, and Ponga is a monkey that can only communicate with Rain and for some reason can play a violin. So as the boys leave, only Ponga joins their party as they head out to their house in Tanya through the Iwata forest to find this room that they were talking about. But as they get there, they hear that a fire has broken out in Ruri caused by monsters that are apparently after Rain. So they run back and they find out that their grandfather has been killed and the clock inside him actually stops.
At this point, Rain joins the party, and pretty much you'll be traveling with these four throughout the game. So yeah, like the two brothers, Red and his younger brother, Blue, Rain, the mysterious chick that we find out can use magic, and Ponga the monkey.
So finally, they head out to the Iwata forest, and when you get there, there's this massive thing that's landed with, looks like a person inside of it.
It's like this crystal thing, yeah.
And there's an old man, and when they talk to the old man, they find out that he has the voice of a girl, which is kind of an indication that he's being possessed.
Right.
And he tells them about the mysterious treasure hunter that we mentioned before, unlocking the Dark Lord by attempting to steal his crown.
These two that are actually after the crown, one of them says, "Hey, you don't want to do this. There's this whole legend, myth behind it that if you break the seal, it's gonna release chaos all over the world." Well, the one in charge gets frustrated and he's like, "Hey, I'm here. I saw this is mine, I'm taking it. So he kills the person he's traveling with, which I guess is a guide. So that's what releases the Dark Lord.
So when that cutscene ends, you find the party at the children's home in Tanya, where they find the adventure room. And once inside, Blue bumps into a bookshelf where a book falls out with a note from his father explaining that he's very sorry about keeping him in the dark and that he didn't want them to get involved in what he was seeing signs of a very chaotic future. And these signs revolved around secrets of the O-Parts and the World's Tree.
Yeah, and the O-Parts are essentially fragments that you need to collect in the game to defeat the Dark Lord, but they don't really explain a lot about him in the beginning, so it's kind of, it leaves you in the dark there. It gets more interesting because I guess after you collect the first one, I guess your journey starts kind of unraveling. You know where you're kind of leading up to.
Yeah, so this is basically what leads you into starting your adventure. The boys start to realize that maybe their father is not full of crap and that he's maybe telling some truths. So to move on, like every great RPG, there's awesome town music. So
excellent
we have a couple tracks here. One of them is called My Rural Town, and the second one is called Upscale Harbor Town, and we'll play those and we'll be right back.
just heard My Rural Town and Upscale Harbor Town, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, fun town music. They're always a little bit different. This first one is kind of sleepy town feel, and then there's that part where it punches up and gets much more robust and more like epic adventure feeling.
Right. I think all the town music in a lot of RPGs has to be really inviting. It has to be like your safe place. And this track, I love how it starts off. It makes, I don't know, to me it feels like sunrise. Like the sun is kind of coming up. You can see like the farm, like cows and I don't know, like, you know, kids running around, and just really peaceful place. And then it builds up into this really strong kind of like orchestral, like adventurous track, which is awkward for town music.
Yeah,
we don't hear that a lot.
Very kind of intense for a town music.
And we don't hear that much, but I think that, you know, it does sound good. It does work together well because it starts over and it goes right back into that kind of dreamy, like kind of, you know, slow sunrise feeling.
Yeah, and that next track was even more different. It was very kind of island coastal feel, I think, with those xylophone, like, you know, cymbal sounds and then the drums and stuff like that. I was like, wow, this is very fun. It reminded me a little bit of like some Super Nintendo Mario Kart.
Okay, yeah. There was one sound effect in there, or one instrument in there that it was so funny to me because it sounded like a whoop.
Yeah, like I was thinking that, yeah.
And I kept hearing that, and just like, oh my god, this is hilarious. But no, it does have that kind of tropical Caribbean feel, and this is a coastal town. I like this part of the game too because it's a really big town. It's like has paved roads, which we don't see in the other towns, and you can finally meet some interesting characters. There's also a casino in this town. Yeah, it's really funny. So you play, like, you collect frogs and stuff in the game. You can pick them up in bushes and stuff. And this casino is a frog gambling casino.
Oh, I didn't get to that part.
Yeah, no, it's really fun. So what you do is you can go in there and you can make bets and say, like, I'm going to bet my frog that will get first place in this race. So it's like a button mashing race.
Okay.
And the frog will, you know, jump until you get to the finish line. And, I mean, it's really hard to do, actually. Yeah. But there's all sorts of little mini games and stuff like that. And this town, this music is from that town. So it just kind of gave me this really happy kind of, like, laid back but kind of more ritzy vibe than you know, this really rural village that we heard first.
That's funny. Like I wasn't sure what to do with the frogs. I was collecting a whole bunch of them. Then I found in one of the bars there's a guy that's like, hey, you got any deals for me? Like, I'll give you like 15 whatever the currency is for a frog.
It's give.
Oh yeah, give. And then he's for frogs. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna just collect frogs. 'Cause in the beginning they ask you to go buy some armor before you can take off. And I was like, I have like no money.
No money.
Yeah, like you need like hundreds of give to like buy stuff. And then so I just started running around collecting frogs and selling to this guy. And so other than that, I didn't know what you were doing.
That's exactly how I did it too. You know, so to talk about the gameplay a little bit, it's a single player turn-based tactical RPG. It's kind of got two different game modes where you have the normal adventuring mode like we're explaining right now, and then you have your battle combat system. But the game is kind of similar to Chrono Trigger or Seiken Densetsu 3, where the group or your party explores different things like towns and dungeons and forests and stuff like that. But back to the town, it's really interesting because there's so much to do. And when I was first playing, I had no money, and I was like, well, where am I supposed to go? So it really gets you into the sense of like, hey, you got to do this on your own. The grandpa, when you know, before he passes away, he's like, oh, let me give you some money when you head out. He gives you one give.
Yeah, because this is before the fire. He's like, you're getting ready to run out, and Ponga joins your group, and he's like, but before you go, you have to kind of like armor up, like get ready. Yeah. So you're running around trying to find, how am I going to buy like weapons and armor and stuff because I have no money.
Things that are really important in this game, it's the destruction aspect. So the vandalism, I mean, it sounds bad because, you know, you go into people's houses and you like go through like their you know,
drawers
or you break their barrels or whatnot, and that's how you find money in the game. That's like the only kind of way, or items and stuff. The world itself in these towns is kind of fun though, because you can chop bushes down, you can rustle plants, and frogs will pop out, and there's just a lot going on. It's really fun.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see, like, there was one spot where there was an old lady, and I like punched all the plants in her front yard, and she comes out and she's like, oh, thank you for doing that, like, here's money.
You weeded my garden.
Yeah, so then I was like, oh, okay, she gave me like 200 give or something like that. So I was like, okay, this might be a good way to raise money. So I did it again, because after you go into a building and come out, all the plants come back. I went to go do it again, and she's like, oh, thanks, like, here's 20. And I was like, oh, okay. So they obviously don't want me to like
keep doing
grind
it.
money that way.
Yeah, but no, I think that what you mentioned, like, there's a lot of little touches like that make this game really fun. I was wondering if you would actually see some of the things, because I noticed that one as well, and I was like, I wonder if James is gonna do the same path, because it's totally optional. It's not something you need to do. It's just natural, organic exploring, and I think that's.
Well, I was punching for frogs. Like you punch the plants, and then frogs pop out, and I was going to go sell the frogs, and I just cleared this lady's yard, and she's like, "Oh, hey, here's this money."
The towns themselves are kind of fun though too. They have the typical. They're small. Some of them anyway are fairly small. Like the first village, and the village your father lives in are also pretty small feeling villages. They usually always have your standard thing, like your standard fare, like your item shop and your weapon shop, armory,
and an inn and stuff like that,
and also a bar. And it's actually fun. Like, I really like the bar music a lot. I think it's really fun. It's let's go ahead and play it. It's actually, I have it here. It's called "Hey Darlin, Aren't You Gonna Come Any Closer?" And we'll check that out. We'll be right back. That was "Hey Darlin, Aren't You Gonna Come Any Closer?" composed by Toshiaki Sakoda, and we'll talk about him in a bit. What a fun track, though.
Yeah, super fun. I mean, it's kind of what you would expect in an old-timey town, to have like a bar that's kind of very Wild Western feel with
it's got
big
that really
piano, and like there's somebody playing the piano while everyone else is like sitting around drinking, and everything's made of wood, and so it kind of has like that fun like
tavern feel. Yeah. No, it's a cool track. So every time I would go in the bar, the casino plays the same music too.
Oh, okay, cool.
But the casino is kind of like that old time style tavern look anyway. No, it's just a fun track. Like that walking bass is so fun, but it sounds like whoever's playing the piano. I know it's a genre, like a style, like a ragtime kind of swing thing. It sounds like they're drinking as well, and they're just going off and doing whatever they want. It's a little discordant, but at the same time, it's fun. It's a fun track.
Yeah, no, and like you mentioned with this game, like you have to kind of go around and break people's barrels and kind of search within buildings. Like, so this got me to search around in the bar, and you can take Red, and he walks up to the piano, and he actually starts playing, and it's like very bad, and it gets worse, and then he just kind of like hangs his head. Like, I don't know, do you have like a clip of that?
Yeah, I can play that right now. Hang on. Okay, so I guess it's 4 tracks. There's like level 1, level 2, level 3, and 4. I've never heard more than that first one.
It makes sense that Red might get a little better.
Yeah, but here, hold on, let's play that.
And there's where he hangs his head in shame of being so terrible.
And here's the second one. A little bit better.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot better.
Yeah.
And here's the third one. Got a little bass in there.
Yeah. Whoops.
And here's the fourth one.
That's cool.
That's tight.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, like we had mentioned, that these towns are very charming, and there's so much little interesting things to do. Like, this is not anything that seems very important to the story, and it's kind of fun, and the towns are just filled with people that say funny things and that are doing funny things, and it just kind of adds a little bit of lightheartedness to this big adventure.
In the English translation that you're playing, is there a lot of comedy? Are you noticing a lot of comedy in the text? Because I'm getting a lot of comedic situations, and I'm wondering how well that translates over.
Yeah,
but
there was one that I was playing, and you're kind of like inside the mountain, and you're talking to like all these, like, they look like monks or something,
Right,
that live in the mountain, and they're giving you like wisdom. And some of them are giving, like in the first couple, they're giving you kind of like a humorous bit of wisdom, but it's something that's like, okay, I could actually take that and learn from that. But then there's this one guy you walk up to, so it kind of makes you talk to everybody.
Right.
And you walk up to this guy, and he's like, something like, my butt is itchy, but I won't scratch it. And that's one of the mysteries of life, or something like that. And I had to take a picture of it, and I was just like, oh my God, that is so
That's
funny.
got to go on Instagram as soon as we post this episode. That's awesome. Anyways, so let's explain the world map a little bit. And this is a little bit similar to what we'd see in, I guess, every RPG at this point. It's this really open world map that uses mode 7. It's kind of nice.
It has like a realisticness to it. Like you can see like the curvature of the Earth or whatever this planet is that it's called. So it has like this cool, like you're looking at a real environment instead of just like a flat map.
Right. And you can see little towns kind of scattered all over the place. Like, let's say you're on the first part of the map where you have like the town of Ruri and a few other like towns and caves and stuff. You can see well beyond that, but you can't get to it yet. So you can tell that there's stuff ahead on your journey. You just aren't able to get through those areas yet. And I think that it's cool because you can still see like the horizon. You can see the sky. It doesn't have like this flat, straight down view, like a bird's eye view.
It's almost like you're kind of looking at it from like really high up in the sky or kind of like just below orbit. To me, it really adds like this adventure, like this open world feel to it. Like you said, it doesn't feel flat. It feels like a real world, which I think just adds a whole nother level of qualities to this game.
Right. And it doesn't have like, it's not like a ton of colors you're seeing. You're seeing like greens and browns and, you know, the ocean, blue, sky. But it's all these awesome earth tones, and it does have that feeling of like adventure. The setting for the game is spectacular. I think it's really, that part at least is really well done.
Yeah, it's kind of like a early Google Earth type thing.
Yeah, it's cool. Anyways, why don't we get into some world map music? This is called Around the World, and it's composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka.
That was Around the World for Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka.
I really like the rolling snare. I think that always indicates to me like it's this adventurous overworld. Even though the main melody and the bass are very mellow and laid back, having that rolling, that drum roll in the background, that marching snare, always kind of heeds the thought of going out on an adventure in this big, vast environment.
Right.
I like that.
Right. And for me, one thing about map music is that this is something that can really make the game feel real. Like you would think as a player that the map is not that important. It's just kind of like shows you where is your next point. But for me, it's like the placement of different towns or mountains or forests or whatever. It really shows that the developers of the game really care about this world and they want to make something somewhat realistic or in a way to where it feels like this could be a real world. It allows you to get sucked into the world of this game.
Right.
And I think the music is something that really helps with that. This is very fun and adventurous, and it's kind of laid back, and it makes you feel kind of safe, but at the same time, it allows you to feel like this openness to the world.
And you're only hearing this music when you're traversing. You're not hearing it in battles. You're not hearing it. You're not going to get into battles in with this music playing. You're only going from point A to point B. And so really having something that's too intense is just going to be distracting because this is only your characters, your party, just really getting to the next destination. I think having something that's kind of open like this is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and move over to the battle system because this is where the game really, really shines.
So yeah, like we were saying earlier, the game is a tactical JRPG, so the battle system is turn-based, and you're on a grid that uses action points for moving, attacking, using items, and casting magic.
It's a bit different from Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics regarding the movement, so depending on the enemy, your movement area is limited.
Yeah, so each enemy kind of has a ring around them that gets like more and more dangerous. There's
based on the grid.
Right. So there's a red area directly around the enemy, and then a little bit outside of that, there's a yellow ring and then a blue ring.
Right. And so if let's say your character gets, 20 action points to move around or use items or whatnot, when you get closer to that grid, or when you get into the grid closer to the enemy, the colors will have your action points.
Right.
So if you get into the yellow, you may have 10 action points. You get into the red, you may only have 3 or whatnot. But that kind of adds a different layer of complexity. You have to really think about your positioning because once you get in towards the enemy, your movement and your actions are very, very limited at that point.
And like most strategy games, hitting bad guys revolves around using their weaknesses to your advantage.
Right.
So like you would expect, hitting someone straight on from the front would do probably about the minimum amount of damage. Hitting them from the side would do a little bit more, but hitting them from the back can really increase how much damage you're doing to these characters. So using that to your advantage could really kind of make or break some of these battles.
Right. And I think that's not done a whole lot. There's not a lot of games that I can directly think of where, your positioning in a grid actually makes a big difference.
Yeah, and to me, this really makes it a very smart game because you have to think very thoroughly about what you're doing because, like you said, the movement becomes more limited the more enemies that are on the screen with being in their kind of danger zone.
You might have everything red at one point and you can barely move. So.
Right. So then you have to not only plan that, but plan out what is your best advantage. So I think that makes it feel much more like a chess game or something that takes a lot more planning, whereas it's not so much like a run and gun kind of like, oh, I'm just going to get in all these battles and just take them as they come. Like you have to actually think about it.
You have to think each thing through because it may throw you off and you may find your party members just getting picked off like flies. To attack a specific enemy, though, it's kind of nice because you can use the L and R buttons like as triggers to pivot your character around. So let's say you're facing like this giant rat and one comes up right behind you. You can pivot without using any of your action points and attack him. So it's more of like a head-on face-to-face fight rather than just attacking forward or having to walk around him and use your action points. So I like that.
Yeah, and that was one thing too that makes this game even more difficult is moving around. It uses your action points no matter if you decide to go that direction or not. with a lot of games you can get and say, I'll move 4 spaces forward. And then you're like, no, I really don't want to do that. That's going to mess up something for later on down the road. So I'll just move 4 spaces back and you get all your points back.
Right.
In this game, it's not like that. So if you don't use L and R to pivot and you accidentally move to the right and you're like, oh, I want to go move back to the left. You've burned 2 move points.
Right.
So it can be very difficult. So getting used to using the L and R can be a huge time saver. Plus, it can actually save your battle.
Different characters have different attributes as well. So like Ponga has, I guess, what is like that boomerang?
Yeah,
or
it kind of seems like
that?
a boomerang.
Yeah, anyways, he can hit 2 enemies that are side by side. So if there's 2 enemies in front of him, one and then one directly behind him, he could throw the boomerang out and get 2 attacks right in a row without being next to the other one. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like those little advantages can really help these battles. And I think Blue has something as well, right? Like the spear?
Yeah, so he has a spear that can do max damage to the enemy that's in front of him, but it'll also do about half the damage to an enemy behind him. But you do have to be careful because there's friendly fire within the game. So if, say, Rain is standing directly behind him and he uses the spear, he'll actually attack Rain behind him as well. So
Right. I did switch different weapons for Blue, but I remember that being one that I did like it a lot. It was pretty powerful. Anyways, the battles with bosses and stuff can take quite a bit of time, but general battles that you just find, they move fairly quickly. So you never really get sick of even the smaller battles. You don't feel like, oh my God, I just got to get through this and, blast away on the A button and hopefully I'll just turn out okay. Mm-hmm. It really does. You feel good about each battle. It doesn't get too stale.
Yeah. And I think the complexity of each battle can add to that because each battle can be something totally fresh and new.
Right. Everything outside of the standard attack is done through menus. So it helps because let's say I want to attack maybe the zombie or something. I can use the A button to attack. I don't have to drill through a bunch of menus like you would with like the Final Fantasy games. And all of your items and stuff those are done through menus. So like your spell casting and stuff like that. Being able to have a quick 1-button, attack is very advantageous and makes the battles move very quick.
No, it definitely works very great.
It's also worth noting that there's no random battles. I love that. I think that that's just a very, it's not that I hate random battles. It's that I think that they have a place. And in this game, it just works so much better not having it. If you've ever played something like Lunar for PlayStation or Sega CD, it's very similar in that sense where you can see the bad guys kind of waltzing around the screen and you can cleverly kind of try to avoid them, avoid the battle altogether, or you can just run right into them and fight. Right. I like that. I think that makes it to where the battles don't get stale because you can expect each battle that you're going into.
Yeah, because I found that sometimes you can get a little annoyed with random battles. Like if you're kind of lost and you need to do a lot of backtracking and it's like, oh, I'm just trying to get somewhere, and then you'll forget or you'll get distracted. Whereas in this, once you kind of clear an area, that area stays clear. So you may not be able to grind for XP and stuff, but you are able to kind of search around and be like, oh, okay, I am getting pretty far and I'm kind of worried, so I want to hit a save. I saw a save point back there, so I'm just going to go back to the save point, save, and work my way back forward.
And you don't have to worry about those enemies respawning. Yeah. So it's definitely nice. The other thing I like about a battle that I think is worth mentioning is that after each battle, your party heals a little bit. So it'll show like, hey, you got some experience points, but you've also healed up, 18, hit points. I like that because in this game, potions are very, very limited.
Right.
And different
they're expensive.
They're very expensive. And so with that, also your items, how many you can carry is very limited. So being able to recharge yourself after a battle can help out a lot. So if you do a lot of these little tiny battles and you get your health all the way up, when you hit that boss, at least you're going to be at your maximum capacity.
Yeah, I mean, it's very smart then to go into these battles and not just blast through them. Even though if there's like 4 rats or something like that, you might want to take them on very strategically so that you basically don't lose much health and you're basically able to regain more health than you had when you started. Because at first I thought, I'm like, it's just fully regenerating all my health. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I realized that no, it's not giving me full health back. It's, giving me like 30 points where I may have lost 50 or something.
Yeah. So it becomes something.
Yeah. It becomes very, another layer of strategic complexity, which I think is great.
What I also find is interesting about this is you can't use magic and stuff in the field. You can only use it in battle. So when I'm using Rain, she can cast healing magic and she can also cast offensive magic as well. But the healing magic is only usable during battles. So if you're out in the field and your health is low and you know a boss is coming up, well, you can't heal. You have to wait until a battle, or you have to go find something that's easy to fight first, have your characters all heal up, and then go take out the enemies to move on.
Well, and like the save spots, there is another spot for, it's like a dark blue statue that will allow you to regain all of your health and magic points. So, but those are kind of sparsely
they're kind of rare. But yeah, anyways, moving on, we have some excellent battle music to play. Do you want to go ahead and read that off, James?
Yeah, so first up, we have Go Go Kids, which is the main battle theme. Then we have A Drink to Victory, which is the after battle fanfare. And then finally we have Demi Human Battle, which is the boss battle.
That was Go-Go Kids, composed by Masahiro Iwata, A Drink to Victory, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka, and Demi-Human Battle, composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto.
Great battle music. I mean, I love great battle music because, like we've mentioned before, you're going to hear this over and over and over. So if it's not good, it's going to really make the game hard to play.
Yeah, you're going to get in a lot of battles. So if it's something that sucks, you're going to know that it sucks every single time, and it's going to leave a sour taste in your mouth. And I think that this music is just well done. It's really lively, and it keeps that energy, and it just changes and evolves over the course of a battle. You may end up only hearing the first minute of it, but maybe in a longer, more strategic battle, you hear like it over and over, and I think that it's still awesome. Yeah,
I mean, Go-Go Kids, it was very heroic feeling. It kind of made you feel like I can handle this, I can do this, and so I really like that because these are some of the ones that are going to kind of wear on you a little bit because you're going to do a lot of these little mini battles, and it's each time it kind of reminds you like, oh, this is fun, like you're going to have fun, you can do this. Like it may seem overwhelming or complex to have like 20 different bad guys on the screen and try to clear it, but it's really good.
Yeah, because it's right when your gears start turning, right? Because you see this dialogue pop up like, hey, it's time to fight, and all of a sudden, like you're the first thing in your mind is you're like thinking like, where am I gonna strategically start moving? You're already, the gears are turning in your head, and I think that it kind of goes with the music. It kind of builds up and gets more progressive, and you're really thinking about your strategy, and I think that's really awesome. A Drink to Victory. This is composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka. This you're almost always going to hear immediately after a battle.
Well, if you don't, then you're going to have to do the battle again.
Then you've died.
Yeah.
It's a great track, man. That bass line, he does, I don't know what he is on, but he is doing like amazing things with the bass sample on the soundtrack. Yeah. And I think you turn the bass up when you listen to that track. It's so cool. It's all the stuff that he's doing with the bass there.
Yeah,
really
I mean, it does exactly what the after battle fanfare should do. It kind of ramps up, and it's like da 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 da, and it's like it makes you feel like, oh man, I did it. Like some of these battles are going to be very difficult, so you might have to do them a couple times, and the fact that you did it, you get that. It's almost like your reward for completing the battle is this music, and it just really gets ingrained in you because to finish the game, you're going to be constantly progressing through this type of music, and it's great.
Right. You're not going to be hearing this for very long, too, because this is just saying, hey, like your XP, you may have leveled up.
Right.
You're not going to hear it usually in its entirety, but just that extra kind of boost, like, hey, good job, man. Keep going. Is really cool for a fanfare. I think that's always really important for games like this, especially when you're getting into constant battles. You need some kind of reward.
Yeah, and this is a type of song that gets ingrained in your head. Like if you play Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy and stuff like that, those after battle musics really get ingrained in you, and it makes you feel good when you hear them again because it gives you that sense of accomplishment you got in the game.
Right. And Demi-Human Battle, this track, this might even be my favorite one. This is so like, it's really courageous and dark, but there's something about it. It's so special. This is just a fantastic track.
Yeah, I mean, it's very dangerous sounding, and I love how the different melodies kind of play off and turn off and on. And
I was just going to say, there's like this really cool call and response with the strings and the horns, and I think that's exactly what you're alluding to.
Yeah, and then later on in this song, it's really great how each instrument kind of gets its own part. Like the xylophone gets a little part on its own, and then like the bass gets a part on its own, and the keys and all that stuff. It's so good that it kind of lets you know like all these sounds that are making this song, and they get their own spot, and then it goes right back into being really intense and just kind of really getting you going like, oh my god, this is really big. Like the sprites may not be huge, or like the battle may not seem that dangerous, but it really makes you feel like this is important compared to like Go Kids Go, which feels a little bit more fun. This definitely feels like you're gonna die if you're not careful.
Yeah, this is it. This is a boss battle, like take this one seriously kind of thing. I think that's so fun about RPGs, having something that is really so different between your regular battles, your boss battles, your mid-boss battles, and your final battle even. There's so many different kind of themes in there, and each one has its own pace and its own tone. Anyways, I think it's time for us to talk about the soundtrack a little bit, because it did get released in Japan, and it has a phenomenal list of composers, so let's get into them a little bit.
The Treasure Hunter G original soundtrack was published by NTT on 2 discs, totaling 86 tracks.
And you can see why it was so hard for us to narrow this down.
Yeah, so much great music.
86 tracks, my God.
Yeah. Anyway, the CD was released for about $30 in Japan and came out only a few weeks after the game did.
Yeah, there's only 4 composers that are listed in the credits. So if you look at the credits at the ending of the game, only 4 people are listed. It's Mitsuhito Tanaka, Toshiaki Sakoda, Hitoshi Sakimoto, and Masaharu Iwata. But the soundtrack liner notes state that it was also composed and arranged by Yoko Takada, Tomoko Matsui, and Akiko Goto as well.
I couldn't find much about any of the other composers other than Goto, who worked on Inazuma Serve Da Super Beach Volley. So I think they were working more as freelance contributors and wrote some of the tracks, but weren't really composing for games normally.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. I tried to look as well. I didn't see anything else that they've done. So they could be like composers that are doing movie scores or other stuff, and they may have just helped for this game. I'm not exactly sure, but they do have some tracks that they're clearly credited for in the liner notes. So Mitsuhito Tanaka is credited as John P in the game, and Masaharu Iwata, we've talked about them already. Toshiaki Sakoda is listed as T Sakoda, and Toshiaki got his start over at Compile in the late 80s, and then in the mid 90s moved over to Sting. He's probably best known for his work on the Devil Crush game for TurboGrafx 16 and Musha for Genesis, but he's also done a lot of other games as well.
Yeah, games like Elise 2 for MSX, Gun-Knack for NES, GG Elise for Game Gear, Evolution 2 Dreamcast, Evolution Worlds for GameCube, Riviera, The Promised Land for PSP, and Baroque on Saturn and Wii.
Yeah, and he's actually worked on quite a few other games, but was never credited. I was reading an interview, and he actually stated that he didn't want to be credited at all in those games. Like, he just didn't want his name even said.
Wow.
So, yeah, he's just done a ton of other stuff, but he's like, I'm going to keep this as like a ghost composer.
That's cool.
Not going to let anybody know. But he did state that Seirei, Senshi Spriggan, and Treasure Hunter G were his absolute favorite soundtracks to compose for. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Anyways, Masaharu Iwata.
Yeah, and we've talked about him on the show before.
Right.
But again, as a refresher, he's been doing a ton of freelance work, even during high school, and then began working at Square in 1997 until 2002, when he founded Base Escape with Hitoshi Sakimoto and Manabu Namiki.
Yeah, Iwata's done a load of stuff, like Metal Orange for the PC-88, Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre along with Sakimoto, Shin Megami Tensei for PC Engine, Valkyria Chronicles 2 and 3, but he's best known for Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy 12. He's still doing stuff at Base Escape, where he currently works today, along with one of his closest friends and the next composer of Treasure Hunter G, Hitoshi Sakimoto.
And we've talked about Sakimoto quite a few times on the show, so I don't think we really need to go into too much of his career, but we do want to reiterate for anyone that's new to the show and hasn't listened before. So most of his work has been done as a freelance composer, working on titles like Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre, Baroque, Evolution, and Final Fantasy Tactics. So let's actually get into a Sakimoto track. We have Emperor of Balladry, so we're going to play that and we'll be right back.
That was The Emperor of Balladry, composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto for Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom.
Very beautiful and delicate, almost.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite orchestral pieces in this soundtrack. It's just so emotional and so. I mean, it starts with these really graceful, simple like strings, and the bass and the rest of the orchestra comes in, and it has this crescendo, and it just gets so powerful. And I really like this track. It's just so, it speaks to me, I think.
Yeah, and I love how after it's kind of gone through its build up, it goes back to being very delicate before the loop or before the end of the song. So
yeah, no, this is just a wonderful track. And Hitoshi Sakimoto is just a stellar composer. He's done so much good stuff that, I mean, Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre, those soundtracks are phenomenal, and you can hear his styles and his influences in a lot of the stuff that he does, and it shows a lot in this soundtrack as well. And I think that this huge cast of composers really, they knew each other's styles, and they knew how to work off of each other, and they knew how to take their own fortes and kind of maximize that to create this just wonderful soundtrack.
Yeah, they were almost like their own little party traveling through an RPG.
It's funny, they actually called the group the Sting Orchestra. That's what they called all, 7 or 8 of these composers when they were working on this. It's really cool. We actually have another track to play, and this is just a very, very beautiful track. I could not leave this one out. It's called Sad Freedom, and it's composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka. So let's listen to that, and we'll return in a second.
That was Sad Freedom for Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka.
Man, Tanaka-san again with that bass.
Oh, so good.
It's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, this track has a little bit more of an urgent feel. I love the like chimes and then right into the piano. Like the piano is so good.
The piano is so good.
It's very different than the piano we heard earlier in the show. That was kind of like a fun little like Western bar sound, but this is just like gorgeous. I mean, it's so good.
It's really pretty. I wonder if there's like a video on YouTube of somebody playing this. We got to check.
Yeah.
There's got to be something, right? It's really pretty. If not, I'm going to go like learn to play it on the piano.
I know. I was just thinking that. We need to learn to play the piano then.
And put it on YouTube. I really like the parts of this song. It has this really noir feel.
Mm-hmm. And
especially in those where the bass line is just playing with the piano, it has that really noir feel to me. It reminded me of like Police Knots. Mm-hmm. And if you're a Police Knots fan, you probably know what I'm saying. It's got kind of that noir vibe, and I think that is what reminded me the whole time of that. But this track is it's really pretty. It goes into this like totally different section right before the loop, and it's again it's kind of awkward because it's not like this pretty elegant thing anymore. It's this really kind of like boastful track, and then it heads back into that slow mellow part. It's interesting to see the contrast.
Yeah, I mean, it has those echoey notes that feel a little different, but I thought it was very cool. It made the track have a little bit of an arc to it that I think if you were to listen to it on loop and stuff like that it would kind of help make it feel not so repetitive. But I mean, the track is gorgeous. This is probably one of my favorite tracks. So
yeah, I know, it's really good. Let's go ahead and move on to talk about the graphics a little bit, because there are essentially what you're going to be looking at the whole time, and it's something that is important to a lot of RPGs, and it's very important to this game to create this aesthetic that you're going to want to kind of stick through for the however long you're going to end up playing it. I think the game is 30 hours or something like that, which is short for an RPG.
Yeah.
But still, you need to have something that is aesthetically pleasing to where people are going to want to explore new areas and they're going to want to see. And we kind of talked about the towns and stuff already, but to kind of give you guys an idea of the graphics, I think they have a really nice palette.
Yeah, their palette is really great. They have a lot of really good colors. They use them very well. There's a lot of good definition between foreground, background, all that stuff. A lot of great variety. But one of the things that made this game look so unique for the Super Nintendo was the fact that they used pre-rendered 3D models instead of hand-drawn sprites for the characters.
And that's what stood out to me when I first saw it. I was like, there's something looks different. It's not the normal sprites that I'm used to seeing. Now, not all things are done in 3D mesh. There's a lot of sprite work done, but all the characters have this 3D look to them. And it's very similar to what you'd see in Donkey Kong Country, except that I think that Donkey Kong Country kind of goes to the extreme.
Yeah.
Where this is a little more subtle.
Yeah, at first I didn't quite notice it, and I was like, what is making these characters look so different? Like they have a more roundness to them and a more three-dimensional feel, and then noticed that they were using 3D models, and this became very apparent in the battle system because, like we mentioned before, you can cycle your character around using L and R, but it's not just facing up, down, left, or right. It's actually an 8-way cycle, so you can face at angles.
Right.
So, which was very cool because then you could attack at angles and you could move at angles because you had a character sprite that was from an angle because they use a 3D models, which was really cool. So that made that simple battle system feel even more interesting because it's not something you would normally see.
And I think a lot of games nowadays, like indie games that are coming out that are using sprite work, I mean, this is the essence of where sprite work started because, we had earlier stuff in the 8-bit era, but the 16-bit era is when we really had this huge color palette to work with, and the sprites were even more detailed. There was a lot more we could put on the screen. And so this is exactly what is being referenced, I think, in a lot of modern games. You look at the house, you look at the town, you look at the battles, you look at the characters. Even though those have like a 3D look to them, they're still essentially like they still look kind of like sprites.
Right.
They aged a lot better than say like Donkey Kong or something like that. I think that these still look really good today. The sprite work in this game is just so fabulously done. They pull it off so well.
Yeah, I mean, just for example, like looking inside one of the houses, there's all kinds of unique things in each house that make each house feel completely different. There's great colors, awesome patterns. You don't see a lot of like really repetitive pattern that draws your attention right to it. And they were able to achieve things like highlights and shadows and glowing, which is all still done in sprite work, but it makes everything feel so 3D. So then it's not just the characters feel like they stand out on this flat background. Everything seems to work together. So it kind of tricks you into not really knowing what is making this game feel different or really what is standing out until you really pay attention to it.
Yeah, if you compare it to something like The Legend of Zelda for Super Nintendo, this is way more detailed than that. This is extremely sophisticated when it comes to the sprite work that's done. I mean, you know, you look at these castles and these enemy sprites, and they're all very unique. Like the early battles and stuff when you're fighting like rats and stuff, those are all kind of, you know, color swaps and stuff. But when you get into these dungeons and the monsters that you come across, they may take up, you know, half the screen. They're you know, huge. And having something like this really pretty sprite work mixed in with like the mode 7 just create a cool package.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I only got maybe about 5 hours into the game, so I didn't get past a lot of the early kind of like small little fights and stuff like that. So, but from some of the scenes that I've seen later on, it's just like, oh, wow, I cannot believe like some of the complexity of some of these characters, how big some of the sprites are, or some of the bosses are. Everything works together so well.
Right, and I think that if we go back to the 3D modeling, I think that's the only thing I would have liked to see just stay as sprite work. To be honest, I know that there's, you know, it's pretty, it's well done. I appreciate for what it is. And I know that Sting was trying to do something kind of out of the box, something kind of different. But I think to me, like playing it today, because I didn't play this growing up. So it wasn't like, whoa, look at these animations. It was more like, I could have just used sprites. I would have been fine with that, because we saw that in Wild Arms when we were talking about Wild Arms.
Right.
And they used simple sprites for the characters. They didn't try to go overboard. Now, boss battles were different, but, you know, keeping the same aesthetic all the way across the board, the towns, the items, everything, having the characters have a different look kind of threw me off a little bit.
See, for me, it was a little bit of the opposite. I think for Wild Arms, they did a completely different type of battle system. Plus, they did like early 3D, like actual polygons. So it wasn't trying to trick you into thinking that it was 2D. It was just,
that's true.
And so I think with especially the battle system, making it so much easier to create 8 different sprites by taking a 3D model and rotating it a little bit and then turning that into a sprite and rotating it, turning it into another sprite, I think made the battle system work really great. And the thing I also liked was that by doing this, I feel like they got the complexity out of the characters that they wanted, so they didn't have to do something totally different for the battling, like how Wild Arms, it doesn't look anything like the game except for the fact that it's the same characters, because it's like 3D models and then the rest of the game is sprites.
Right.
So I think it maybe allowed them to get some of the detail that they wanted and keep the entire game looking the same without, like when you see...
changing it up.
Yeah, because like if you see like Final Fantasy VII, you get like these really ugly, like choppy little 3D models, and then in the fight scenes, you're like, whoa, this looks really awesome. But there's like that difference. Whereas in this game, the fight scenes... everything almost look like the cutscenes, they look like the running around in the world and stuff like that. So it's almost hard to tell what is a cutscene and what's not. And I think that to me feels like modern games where like cutscenes are the same as like gameplay quality and stuff like that.
Right.
So
I know I get your point there. I think that when you bring up the battle system, especially because we've said countless times, it's where the game shines. Having the 8 direction feel to the characters definitely adds to the playability of the battles, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable because you can see where you are. You're not just randomly pointing in one direction. And yeah, they could have probably added more sprites like to the characters themselves, but why do that when there's something new they could try?
Yeah.
So I see what you mean there.
So before we spend too much time talking about the graphics, let's move on to a music block.
Sounds good.
Next up we have Just Like the Mountain, He Will Not Move, and Buddhist. So let's play those and we'll return in a minute.
You just heard Just Like the Mountain, He Will Not Move, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka, and Buddhist, composed by Masaharu Iwata.
Wow, really cool tracks. I mean, and I noticed in this first one, Just Like the Mountain, He Will Not Move, it has that blow, like sound effect that you had mentioned before that you liked. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, again, Tanaka, I am convinced that he played bass growing up, and that was his first thing into like the music world, because he gets this really, he gets it. It's like this really elegant bass that's like sliding up and down and doing all these really crazy things in the background, and I can't help but focus on that the whole time. Like, even though there's melody and stuff playing on top, my whole attention is always on the bass when any of his tracks come up, and I think that to have a very rich bass line that can be funky at times, it can be very melodic, it can be very like a walking bass, it can have different feelings in of its own. I think that it's really different from a lot of other games that are similar, like your Final Fantasies and stuff. There's so much going on just in that bass section.
Yeah, I mean, and that just goes to show that these game soundtracks are very complex. I mean, they use each instrument to their advantage. They have a certain way. Each instrument can be played so many different ways, and that it's a conscious decision and using limitations to their advantage to make these amazing songs that you can sit there and dissect, and there's a piece of music or a section or an instrument that can really speak to different people. I think that's really great that within these songs that most people would consider very simple or would assume that they're simple, that one person can zero in on one instrument and enjoy a song just for that one instrument, whereas someone else could be like, oh, I really love like this sound, and that really is really exciting to me. So
yeah, it's fun to be able to enjoy it like together and to share with you guys the complexity behind some of this game music, and it's so fun, and we hope you guys are really enjoying this music because we absolutely love it.
Yeah.
The next track, Buddhist, this is such a soaring track.
Yeah.
It's I don't even know. Words can't describe like how like powerful this track is to me. It's a great one.
Yeah, unlike the last one, this one it's a little bit back to that orchestral sound, and this one especially really gives me in my mind's eye like watching this live, and I can see like the different instruments, and like when you're watching an orchestra play, the people, when they're done with their section, they put their instruments down, they like turn their page and their notes, or they lick their lips or whatever to get ready, and then as soon as their part comes back in, you can imagine them raising their instrument and getting back to going.
And,
I mean, I got like a trombone sense in the background.
There's you can hear that tuba. It's really strong.
Yeah, I really like that. And this was the first song that made me think of that. So I thought that was very cool, and that there was one of them that gave me the idea of just listening and thinking about them playing this live, and just how so many so many different instruments going on and different sections in the songs as they progress through. I thought it was very cool.
There's this soundtrack, you don't have to be into orchestral music to enjoy it, but I know that there's people out there who like the fast-paced stuff, the really quick moving, like Rob Hubbard and Euro and Tell and stuff, and we love that stuff, but being able to appreciate the orchestral side of stuff is also very important, I think, to music, and having a deeper understanding, a deeper appreciation of music, because it's really pretty. I mean, there's so much going on for you, like you just mentioned, like little subtleties to pick up, and each instrument kind of speaks to somebody else differently, and it's really important. This game, it's full of so much energy, and I think that the soundtrack portrays a really good depiction. Yeah,
I mean, and out of all the different types of games, when we ask people, what do you want to hear? Like, what do you feel like we're missing on the show? We get a lot of, when are you going to do an RPG? We would love to see an RPG, or here's one. And I think for RPGs, there's something for everyone, no matter if you're really into RPGs or not. Just the music, there's a different type of song for this or that, and there's always something for someone to get excited about.
Yeah, there's that sense of connection too, because like Chrono Trigger music, some of it I absolutely adore. I love it so much, and some of it I don't care for so much. But even those songs that I'm not in love with, I have connections to them somehow, and it still speaks to me, and it still makes me feel good about the track. And it's a shame that this never came to the States, never went to Europe either, because I feel like this game would have been on the mouths of a lot of retro gamers had it been localized. And it got really good reviews for the people that have played the translation. I mean, I looked at GameFAQs, just kind of scouring around at their reviews, and most people were giving it like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, and despite some of its shortcomings. I mean, everybody said the music was stellar, but it's one of those games that we grew up with the Final Fantasies, the Chrono Triggers, and the Secret of Mana, and we didn't have this. But had we grown up with this title, I think that this would have been just still kind of ringing in people's ears today, like some of these tracks, and really kind of go back. We might see more remixes, stuff on YouTube,
Yeah, I mean, even the graphics aside, how they are doing something different, like this soundtrack really pushed what the Super Nintendo's sound hardware could do, because we're hearing such beautiful samples. It doesn't have that like that cliche Super Nintendo sound. I mean, some of these, like we said before, we can't believe that some of this is not like actual CD quality audio.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so good. And it just makes you forget that you're listening to like chiptunes. And I think that's not like it's saying chiptunes are not good or anything. It's just showing like that this system can do chiptunes that's very fun, but this can do something that's also very epic and kind of like soaring and just so adventurous.
It's amazing what you can do with hardware if you have the talent, right? Anyways, let's get into another track, another block of tracks, actually. We're going to play Wow, What a Story by Mitsuhito Tanaka, and The Road to Survival, also by Mitsuhito Tanaka. So let's listen to those, and we will return in a sec.
You just heard Wow, What a Story and The Road to Survival for Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka.
Did you get those little arpeggios?
Yeah, when you pointed it out to me, yeah.
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah.
I couldn't not hear those after that. I was like, wow, that's wild in the background. Very cool tracks.
No, for Wow, What a Story, I kept thinking, wow, what a beautiful song. I mean, it's just like, to me, it had like a story element to it. Like, I felt like this song was filled with things like sadness and joy and excitement and, even triumph and failure. I just thought it was just like a song that had so many feelings in it that it just made it very fun to listen to. And it was just gorgeous. It was just such a beautiful song.
Yeah, the Road to Survival. I loved this track too. Mm-hmm. It was really cool. I guess it reminded me of kind of like you're walking along, you've just finished the game. I mean, this isn't even part of like the ending or anything, but like you just finished the game, you just finished this horrible, grueling battle, and you're walking down, back to your house, and you're just happy, kind of skipping along. It's just what a rad track.
Yeah, I know, it was very fun, and it just made me feel like I wanted to move my body to the beat, and it reminded me of it just made me think of when grandma's had too much to drink at a wedding and she gets up and starts dancing. It's just it made me feel like I wanted to dance awkwardly, but happily. It was just very fun.
And again, the bass line, fantastic. It's just so well done. It just goes right along with melody perfectly, has its own little flares in there. It's just an excellent track. Anyways, I think that kind of wraps up the show today. Yeah, so today we covered Treasure Hunter G on the Super Famicom, composed by Mitsuhito Tanaka, Toshiaki Sakoda, Hitoshi Sakimoto, Masaharu Iwata, Yoko Takada, Tomoko Matsui, and Akiko Godo.
If you want to know more about the show, you can check us out online at pixelatedaudio.com for show notes and track lists. We can also be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Pixelated Audio. Yeah,
feel free to leave some comments or feedback. We appreciate it. If you like RPGs, if you like the music that we played today, and if you haven't played this game, let us know. Hey, Brian, James, I love this track. I like this one. I hated this one. We would love to hear it because, we're picking out a bunch. I mean, there's so much music to choose from in this game. We're picking out some of the tracks that mean something to us.
Right.
But, you might not have the same feeling. So let us know. That's really, really important.
Yeah, and if you're new to the podcast, make sure to check out some of our past episodes like the Nightmare series, Kirby's Dream Land, and even a video game pinball music showcase.
Yeah, we just had an episode with Barry Leach featuring Horizon Chase. That was a blast. A lot of his old music and stuff from his new album that's coming out that's you can actually play right now on iOS. So definitely check that out. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. The track taking us out is called Conquer the World. And we don't have a remix today. So we're going to play another track from this game. And it was composed by Yoko Takada. So thank you guys for listening, and see you guys in the next episode, which will not be a JRPG. It'll be something different. So anyways, hope you guys enjoy it. And again, Conquer the World.